tells us how it can be done, how possible it is, because he's not just telling a story that he read from a book, he's living it. This is advice or pointers from someone who is actually living the story. So yesterday I was taking a drive going to pick up the kids from my sister's place, and I was listening to an audiobook by Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. And right at the beginning of this, because I looked at the book and I'm like, it's a lie. I'm not going to hold an actual book and read this thing. I'm lying to myself. Let me do the audio way. So I plugged in the audio book, and I'm so glad I did so. Right at the very beginning, in the editor's notes, Napoleon Hill writes and says his mentor gave him an ultimatum and said, if you had taken longer than 60 minutes to make a decision, 60 seconds to make a decision on something that is factual, you've got the facts, you've got everything laid out for you. If it takes you longer than a minute to make a decision, he said, I was going to withdraw the proposal. Like, you cannot be trusted because you've got all the facts laid out. What else is it that you need to think about? So it took him 29 seconds to take up the offer that propelled him into the next 20 years of his life. And now we know Napoleon Hill as someone who has written amazing books that have helped us in our success. What is it that you're taking long to think about? The offer might go, and it might go to somebody else, because we know opportunity may not come once, but that opportunity of that magnitude may not come again. So let's think about it, guys. We've got George in studio, and he is our hustle hard guru. George, what do you do?
What to do, Becky K, and good morning to Capi Talk 100.4 FM, Harari's Heartbeat family. How's everybody doing? And I love your intro about Napoleon Hill.
Oh, yeah.
But what people don't understand is that Napoleon Hill was actually the third person to be offered. And what this guy intentionally did, he didn't offer any remuneration to anybody. And this is why the other people lost the opportunity to be around success, because everybody was thinking, no, my time is money.
Yes.
But Napoleon Hill saw an opportunity to serve a successful person. And that's what happens in this life. If you want to be successful, like we always say on Hustle Hard, success leaves clues. And the only way you can get some of those clues are to be around those successful people and to learn some of the things that made them become successful.
Yeah.
And this is why Napoleon Hill, up until today, is one of the richest authors, even though he's not living. Napoleon Hill became richer dead than he was alive because his books started making sense, because he spent 20 years of his life studying successful entrepreneurs and business people. And look at him now. So it's important. I love what you're saying. It's not only about getting, it's important to take quick decisions in this life we live. Otherwise, like we always say, we will pass off opportunities regularly because all we're looking for is that financial return.
Can you imagine a whole opportunity passes because you're thinking about money? Oh, may I not be that shallow?
Yeah.
May I not be that shallow? Right, George, what are we talking about today? We've spoken a lot about how to start the business, how to stay in business, but a lot of things happen in the business world that gets us down, and we feel like, man, this situation, it's not looking too good. Let me shut down. The destination is not looking, it's kind of bleak.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you spoke about your current situation is not your final destination.
Yeah.
But Dara, look at it right now. My sales have gone down by 30% or by 20%. I'm not making as much sales as I used to, or I don't have a lot of traffic coming on as much because people are online, they are shopping online. I'm trying to go in that direction. The situation is just it's not looking good for me. So what do you mean my current situation is not my final destination?
So to everybody listening, your current situation is not your final destination. And today I want to begin with a quote from Mahatma Gandhi, an amazing quote, which I know is really going to settle down in your mind. And this quote says, your beliefs become your thoughts. Your thoughts become your words. Your words become your actions. Your actions become your habits. your habits become your values, and your values ultimately define your destiny. Now, so many people look at people who are well established now and are successful, and they think it happened overnight, but they then do not understand that it took a process for people to be where they are today. And that quote ultimately begins with belief, with words, with thoughts, with actions, with habits, with values, and ultimately, your destiny.
Yeah.
So I would like to make it very practical and speak about, a couple of stories about people that we know, and, to put it in limelight. I remember growing up in Glenora, where I grew up. I had great belief. Some of my friends would come into my room and see me sticking a lot of pictures up on the wall, cars. I've got some pictures on Facebook, and
I still do that.
You see, so I had a lot of, and then basically in the modern term they call that a vision board. And at that time I was staying with my parents in Glenora, on a 200 square meter stand, and my dad had fairly done well.
Yeah.
But then my belief in who I was never what my current situation was.
Okay.
And I've always spoken about this. I think the greatest blessing my father and mother ever did was to put me to a place where I got exposed, which was a private school. And what happens across the other side of town made me realize that where I am ultimately is not where I should end up. We've had so many people reading quotes here, you can be born poor, but it doesn't mean that you should die poor.
That's right.
What you're going to have to do with your life is to make some choices on what you do to end up becoming successful. So going to the other side of town, I remember one of my greatest role model entrepreneurs, my very good friend, Tino Tenda Marimo. We went to school together, and I had the privilege to staying at their house in Eastleigh. And ndakakurira kuGlenora, I couldn't have sleepovers back because kumba kwedu kwangu sina bedroom akawanda. And I couldn't explain that. When I used to tell guys I stay in Glenora, they used to think I stay in Glenlawn. So they wouldn't tally it up because Glenora A and Glenlawn, so I could never have sleepovers, obviously, because there was no space.
Yes.
But when I would go to my friend's house, the exposure I got, and big shout out to Constance Marimo, she ultimately transformed my mind because she grew up in Chitungwiza, and her upbringing was something that she worked at topics, she did a lot of things, she hustled to make sure the family ends were met, until she ultimately opened Wallace Boutique, Wallace Hair Salon, Women Outside, a lot of things that she did. And now she's into, she's an amazing entrepreneur who's always evolved.
Right.
So the exposure I got at that time helped me to say, wait a minute, that's somebody from Chitungwiza. And ultimately now look where they are. And, coming back to me growing up in Glenora with all these pictures, that exposure did something to me. Kuti wait, kana munhu uyu akazviita, and now they're staying the other side of town, they're driving good, living good, having a great life. Surely it's possible and it can be done. So there are many people out there who think, look at the economy, look at where I'm at, I'm not educated enough. The most important thing with the quote that I read is that everything begins with belief. You have to believe it. And you'll find that it's very difficult for you to ever get anything in life that you have never wanted. Ajite. You have to believe to want something intentionally for you to ultimately get that thing. And this is why, in Zimbabwe, there's Scott Sakupwanya, there's Wikno Chivayo. A lot of talk has gone around these guys. But if you get to understand these guys' upbringings, and I've had the privilege to sit down with them and understand that, wait, Scott used to be a gardener, and he worked for a guy who was well boxed up, and he got exposed. And the life he's living today is because of the exposure he put himself in working for a gardener.
Wow.
And then transforming into becoming the amazing business person he is. Same thing with Wikno Chivayo. you know, people will love to say the most about people, but then you'll find they don't understand everybody has an amazing story. And you'll find, you know, I always say that the people who make a lot of noise, if you look at the net worth of those people, they don't have much. And the least they can do is actually try and find out what that person did for them to become successful. Instead of ranting around saying thief, this, corrupt, this, that, and the other. But everybody has a story. And you'll find they had ambitions, they had belief. Same with, we'll go to speak about Alec Macheso, you know, a great musician. He began his career playing for Mazibaba, Nicolas Zakaria, and he was a nobody back then. But then you'll find there's something about people going through a process, and then you see them now being great, that people don't want to go through. So if you look at Alec Macheso, I've spoken to him as well. His upbringing is a very touching one, because, you know, he was, you know, neglected, and he came from Komosha into town, and his story is very touching. But ultimately, he went to serve somebody who was great, and ultimately now, look who he is. You know, we could go on speaking about so many people that we know, but it's so important to understand that where you are today does not determine your final destination. You have to go through the process of being purified. And trust you me, as an entrepreneur, as a business person, as an individual who's living, you have to understand that for gold to be purified, it has to go through immense heat to be then purified to become pure gold. And so many people don't like to go through that burning process. So many people will suffer from the disease we call here on Hustle Hard excusatitis, you know, and blame everybody else. They'll blame the government, they'll blame the economy, you know, they'll blame their parents, and but at the end of the day, who you see who are successful today were some point at a time, not where they are today, but they went through the process. And that process is hard. And, you know, and on Hustle Hard, we don't like to lie to people to make it seem like it's easy. Because trust you me, if I tell you my full story, and I think I've highlighted about it, I failed my O-levels, I wanted to do soccer, I hustled at Zimexmo, I wanted to open a phone shop, Shakaramba, I worked with the paint people. There's a lot of things I went through, and everybody goes through things. But those things, trust you me, have made me ultimately become the person that I am today. So people shouldn't despise the hardships they're facing. You know, in the Bible, in James, it says, count it all joy when you face trials and tribulation. People don't like that verse. But once you overcome them, you know, there's perseverance, there's character, there's muscle that is created whilst you're going through that process. But majority of people, they murmur, they complain, they blame everybody else. But then everything is a process in life. So we need to get to a point where we understand every successful person that we know today has gone through a process. And they began somewhere. I began somewhere. And trust you me, where I began is not where I am. But because of that serious hard work, that belief, that determination that I put into what I want to become, ultimately has made me who I am. So today, we're talking about where you start doesn't determine where you end up.
Or at least it's not supposed to.
It's not supposed to, And
so what then sets us apart from that statement to the final part of the statement, that where you are right now is not your final destination? You spoke about a process, you spoke about not murmuring and complaining, linking it with the scripture. But the truth of the matter is we are going to murmur and complain. But to complain up to what extent?
You know, I think, like I said, you know, it's funny. I was thinking about this yesterday when I was talking to my kids, and you know, we saw a car, and then we're like, do you remember the days when we used to drive the Toyota Noah, and we would go to Zimoko and go by the windows and look and say, wow, one day I'm going to drive that car. And it was a belief. And what I purposely did those days was to make them see what wasn't there as a belief.
Okay.
But many years later, it has then become reality. So you find in this life we live, as much people may say, George, I think you want to tell us this, that, and the other. You know, in the word of God, and I'll keep referring to it, it says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And then it also goes to say, according to your faith, it shall be done unto you.
So are you questioning our faith here, George?
So let me go a little deeper.
I don't have the things I have because of my faith.
You see,
I want
yeah, you have not because you ask not. You see, and you know, anything that anybody wants. So if you see somebody driving the latest car, they had a belief about that car. And trust you me, maybe at that time they didn't have the money.
Right.
But the law of the universe, you know, is the law of attraction. You only have what you have today because you've believed and asked for what you have.
Right.
So if you do not have today, it's because the excuses, the lack of belief, the lack of faith has ultimately led you to thinking that, no, in Dingoro Mushandi, I have one stream of income and that's it. And I can't do anything. But you find to those who have faith as small as a mustard seed, you know, they will be able to say, listen, let me try. And in the word of God, it says, God will bless the works of your hands. And they are not limited, which is why I say to people, we need to ultimately, you know, think of doing other things. Because the definition of insanity, Becky K, is doing the exact same thing and expecting different results. But the people who have faith try. You see, Dana try more because I've a period wondering about you try. And people who are making mistakes are better than people who are doing nothing. Because you'll find I've got friends, and I've said this so many times, who I grew up with. Because of the lack of exposure, and they grew up staying with their parents, they are still at that same place. Why? Because it's a choice. So in this life that you have, I want you to think about this.
Right.
How much time is there in a day?
24 hours.
Okay. Is 24 hours given to a billionaire and a poor person gets lesser time?
No, we're all given the same time.
We're all given the same time. But what makes one person become a billionaire and another one a poor person?
Choices, decisions, sometimes circumstances. Some are born into these millions, you know.
I don't think everybody is born into. So in a day, there's 86,400 seconds to be exact.
All right.
And what we do with these 86,400 seconds, if you use these seconds like money, to Gara Tumboto K, Becky K, we're going to audit you day to day. What do you spend? If I spend a day with you, I can ultimately tell what type of a person you are.
Right.
I can tell, is she a workaholic? Is she somebody who is determined? Is she somebody who pushes?
Right.
You see? You know, there's one of my mentors who said to me, George, if I have lunch with you and phone yako hairire, it shows me kuti hausukutsvagwa. And it shows me kuti hapana munhu ari kutsvaga da kupa mari.
Imi, you.
But wakaona phone yako ichirira, and you know, the first days my phone wasn't as busy.
Yeah.
But years later, it started ringing. Every time we were talking, phone would ring. Now, George, I can tell that there are people pursuing you. You have something that people want, which is why they are calling you.
Right.
And they want to exchange money.
For what you have.
What are people calling you for right now? You see, it determines what you ultimately will be. So it's important as individuals we understand that it's about management of time. Our life is about management of time. What are you doing with your time? If you spend your time like money, I can ultimately tell where you're going to be. So people who have all excuses, I was born poor, I'm in this situation for life.
Yeah.
That's why I've always said, vanhu vakakurira kujecha have a more hunger of success than the people who were born the other side of town. Because they don't want, havasi kuda kudzokera kwavakabva. Because they know how hard it was sleeping in one room, muri 4 or 5, you know, eating in one plate, you know, things were not okay. So that hunger is what then defines people who make it and people who don't. If you see the number of names I've mentioned today, all these guys grew up in subject poverty. And because of that, you know, hustle that they have, they don't want to go back there. And they've made a conscious decision and a choice to say, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to leave a legacy
Yeah.
for generations to come.
Yeah.
But Israel, it's a choice that people make. So where you end up is ultimately defined by you and nobody else. Don't blame ZANU-PF, don't blame Zimbabwe, don't blame I was born kumusha ndakaenda kuchikoro chisina zita rinopronunciatika, I didn't go to a private school. Don't blame anybody. Blame yourself. And the people who make it in this life are people who take responsibility of their life. Some people were impregnated at a young age, but you'll find because of that circumstance, they actually became far better people because of the responsibilities they had to take up at a very early age. For me to be where I am, Becky K, I had twins at a young age, and that pushed me. That was me going through. Imagine, and I was working at that time. But then Israel Rakandi prompted to George, you now have responsibilities.
Yeah.
And I had to make a choice to say, I'm not going to continue working and getting $300.
Yeah.
Let me just jump off this ship and start something. And
Yeah.
because I started something and I made that choice, so many people told me, Nfungoti, my own father, who has supported me so much over the years, said, Gara with 300, better with us, ushandi kunowana 300. Because ndakarota uine this, that and the other, waugara kumba kwangu nehembe dzakabvaruka. But then this is what people are accustomed to now.
Yeah.
Because vazhinji are living their lives based on the opinions of people.
Yeah.
And ultimately it's going to define where people end up. Rarama upenyu wako for you. Make a decision to say, you know what? I'm not going to murmur and complain. Do you know what happened? I love how the Bible puts it.
Yeah.
When you murmur and complain, the only thing you're doing is delaying where you're supposed to arrive
Come
to.
on.
Because complain and murmur and it
God
doesn't
sent you today.
it doesn't add
I just got my
any,
confirmation.
it doesn't add
Yes.
anything to your life.
Yes.
So you find
yes.
people who complain about the economy, rate this, about that. There are others who are taking action. And the people who make it in life are those who are great snipers and executionists. The people who act upon what they're supposed to do. But when no mind complain, they never go anywhere. And you find
This is
them
good. This
you
is so
find them
good.
at the exact same place they
Yeah.
were 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Changochinja ivhudzi rakuita white nemarinkles
Otherwise,
nekukura
same.
munhu achingori pasame place. But to somebody who says, you know what, where I began is not where I'm going to end. It's somebody who says, you know what, I know where I came from and I know where I want to go. Right now, you'll be surprised if we go into the roads, you'll find people who are succeeding in this economy. Trust you me. The others are saying things are not going, but you are seeing so much construction. So much is happening in this country, which is very positive. We shouldn't, take a look and say, no, things are not okay. There's a lot of development that's happening in the country. And we need to, take note of that. And it's a pity when people are just excuse-tizers people and they are not doing what they're supposed to be. So the responsibility of where we end up, I don't care where you are in your office, in your car, it's ultimately up to you. And until you make that conscious decision to say, you know what, why don't I try this? Why don't I try? Because only one stream of income. I tell you, I made that decision. So many people who I know who are entrepreneurs and doing very well in their life,
Yeah.
they took that step of faith. And without faith, it is impossible.
It's impossible. Like,
But God likes those the different people, the Davids,
Yeah.
the Josephs.
Yeah.
And if you talk about Joseph in the Bible, Joseph the dreamer, where he began being sold to his brothers
And where he ended up.
and where he ended up, it's a process. But Romans 8:28, Romans 8:28.
You came all deep on us today.
Romans 8:28, all things work for good for those who love the Lord. And you find God will make certain things happen in your life. I was talking about Scott earlier on. Unosarudzwa kuita garden boy where some guy who is wealthy. For me, it was me being chosen to go and work for the air conditioning company that I worked for. And I'm forever grateful, to Mr. Nwale and what he taught me to be the person that I am. But I learned a lot. And guess what? From those lessons, it may be hard, but you learn something, and then it equips you to go to the next stage.
Yes, it does.
So sometimes vamweni muri kubasa kuti mudzidzire how to treat your employees correctly. Vamwe muri kubasa muzive how
About
to
complaints.
uri kucomplaina but uri kunzi no ndoda kuti uzvinzwisise
Eish.
chimbonzwisa kahardship kekuti ya mara haisi kusvika on time. Kana iwo waziwo boss, understand how these people feel. So everything in life is a process of understanding that what we are going through is ultimately there to refine us and to make us better people. But where we end up as our final destination is our choice. I could have remained in employment. I could have been the top sales guy for where I used to work up until now. But I can tell you, I would never be the person that I am today.
You would have been like what we call a local champion. When
That's
you
right.
are a champion in that area, George is a powerful salesperson for
That's
company
that.
Kwelu, and then that's
But
the
I
end
would
of
have
the
never
story.
known what becoming an entrepreneur is, or becoming a business growth consultant,
Yeah.
or becoming this. I'm speaking on radio.
Yeah.
I go and I speak to so many kids, universities. That's my purpose. So when you sometimes your purpose is found in doing things. And I think like what you were talking about Napoleon Hill.
Yeah.
Napoleon Hill went to serve somebody. And all of us, trust you me, kumabasa edu, we are serving. Ku
That's
church,
true.
we are serving.
Yeah.
Wherever we are, there's something we are learning. And all of it will all make sense at a point in time. All right, I learned this. So for me, staying at my friend's house in like what I call a palace. So in the Bible, Moses and akaiswa mukatsonda vaenda mupalace.
Right.
And so his destination, Moses akakurira kughetto.
Eh.
Momuzi yake bvaingwara bvaendesa mwana ke kuexposure kupalace.
Eh.
Vatorwa naqueen vaitwa wemupalace. But Moses paakakura akati, but wait, this is not where I'm from.
Yeah.
That let me go and empower my people mentally. Kuti life iyi munogona kutoiraramawo imimi.
Zvakatonakisisa.
So let me go and set my people free. Right? So it's the same thing with us, but the problem is tukuramba tiri kughetto. Tukuramba tine mindset ye lack. But there's exposure across town. There's exposure from other people who've made it. And when we learn from that, unotanga kuzoona kuti iwe, is this me? The years back I used to wake up, I was like, is this me living this life? Ndini ndiri kudriva mota iyi. But ndakambozvishuwira. I never understood where I would get the money to get these things.
True.
But whenever you follow your purpose, I love this quote. When there is a vision, if you have a vision, God will provide the provision. Saka vanhu vasina vision of where they want to go, you'll find that Mwari hagone kuropafadza somebody who doesn't know where they want to go.
Yeah.
It's the most dangerous person is somebody who wakes up and doesn't know exactly where they want to go and what they want to do. But kune munhu ane a plan, ane a vision of where they want to go, God will cause all things to work for that person.
We have George Billionaire in studio for Hustle Hard on Capi Talk 100.4 FM. When we come back, we wrap this up, and we are talking about your current situation is not your final destination. Good things take time, and everything that is happening to you right now is preparing you for that imminent breakthrough that you've been crying out for and have been hoping for. If you truly believe that, then the challenges you experience have found a new context. I want you to think about it and repackage it from today, and that hard times are going to be more bearable for you because you're not going through those hard times for nothing. You're going through it because it's polishing you, it's setting you up for something bigger than what you are going through. So one can ask then that the stress of being stuck in one place that I don't like, what do I get to do to get to my destination? Hopefully we'll be able to wrap this up in the remaining minutes on Capi Talk and on the Pulse with George Billionaire for Hustle Hard. Do send through your messages on 0719 104 04. It is Becky K. Is that Capi Talk now? Oh, you came to church to Capi Talk 100.4 FM. There was a whole talk that was happening while the song was playing. I was in my own private session, you know what? George is always coming through with those like, listen, girl, listen. I'm like, I'm listening, Sensei. Sensei, I'm listening. All right, so this is the place where we are at. So what is it that's going to set us apart from the place where we are at and where we want to go. Yes, you mentioned the murmuring and complaining is delaying us, and
You know, when we talk about murmuring and complaining,
Yeah.
let me put it very clearly so
Put it very
people
clear.
understand this.
Mm-hmm.
So, murmuring and complaining does not touch God, but what it does, murmuring and complaining, is praying to the devil.
Yeah, true.
And what you do when you murmur and complain, it actually intensifies your problems. So in the Bible, the word of God says,
George.
"And let the poor,"
George.
let me say this, let the poor say, "I am." Let the weak say, and it. So there's power in saying. So when you're murmuring and complaining, you're not doing yourself any good. And what's going to happen? It says that your words shall accomplish that forth which you send them forth. So from today onwards, if you find yourself wanting to murmur and complain, remember, speak forth only what you want. Whatever you talk about
Yeah.
ultimately will come
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
So right now you might be stuck, hauna basa, you're trying to find your way. Begin to affirm yourself. You know, I remember when I used to look for a job and I was denied at a real estate company. And, you know, I was the most favorite guy to take that job.
Yeah.
But then, you know, zvinhu zvese ka zvimwe mwari anoita on purpose. Mamwe mabasa muri kuti mukutsvaga ka muchinyimwa. God is trying to provoke something in you to go a direction that he wants you to go. Not
Yeah.
all kufungira iwewe.
So this is where you end up taking a no as a redirection,
Yes.
as opposed to being rejected.
And then, like we spoke about Joseph, did that correctly. Joseph's story, I don't know if anybody understands Joseph's story. He went through the worst of cases, you know, being rejected. And that's what's going to happen in life. As a human being, you're going to face rejection. You're going to
Yeah.
face vanhu vachakunyima this, I want a contract E. You know, there's some contracts that I've lost, which I'm so grateful I lost. Because, you know, things ended up going wrong. But I never saw it in that sense until 2 years later. And I was like, gosh, that could have been me in that situation.
Yeah.
So as individuals, let's stop murmuring and complaining. Let's count it all joy. You know, when something bad happens to you, if you have a flat tire, don't murmur and complain. You don't know, that could be a huge blessing in disguise. You could have gotten into a serious something, and you know, the only way to slow you down was to make you this morning have a flat tire. You know, to miss that meeting, to miss that plane, to miss. There's a lot of things God works behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But the worst thing we can do as individuals, that I can guarantee you will make us stay in poverty, strickenness, is murmuring and complaining and becoming people who are full of excusatitis virus. And people who, this is the most important thing before we wrap it up, people who do not take action on what they learn or hear
Yeah.
are the worst people on earth. You know, you have to be somebody who, if you hear something, take action towards that thing. If you learn something, try something new. But if you remain somebody who is full of excuses, somebody who is not learning anything, and you are always hanging around with the chickens, ucharambori with that place. But if you change a lot of things and you make a conscious decision, you know what, I don't want to be where I am, and
Yeah.
ultimately you will cross the line and go to the other side.
Sure, George, you came through and showed out for us today. If you missed this interview, you can always catch it on our social media platforms, on Capi Talk FM, on Facebook, on Instagram, and it will also be posted on our YouTube and also on Spotify as a podcast. This is Becky K on Capi Talk 100.4 FM, and you were listening to Hustle Hard with George Billionaire.
George Billionaire, and you're listening to Cappy Talk $1 million. Shout out to you, my guy. All right, 1 o'clock on Star FM, which is 7 good old time. It's time for